cybersecurity was mostly discussed as a technical topic, and there was not enough frameworks conveying important security and security risk in the way that the stakeholders can easily engage with. And CCE, for me, enabled that.
Welcome, listeners, to the Industrial Security Podcast. My name is Nate Nelson. I'm here with Andrew Ginter, the Vice President of Industrial Security at Waterfall Security Solutions, who's going to introduce the subject and guest of our show today. Andrew, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Nate. Our guest today is Tomomi Aoyama. She is the Principal Development Lead for Private SaaS, that's Software as a Service, at Cognite, which produces industrial control system software. And we're going to talk a little bit about what she's doing, but mostly we're going to talk about her translation of the consequence-driven, cyber-informed engineering textbook, Countering Cyber Sabotage, her translation of the book to Japanese.
Then without further ado, your conversation with Tomomi.
Hello, Tomomi, and welcome to the podcast. Before we get started, can I ask you to say a few words about yourself for our listeners and about the good work that you're doing at Cognite?
Sure. Thank you very much for having me, Andrew, by the way. I'm Tomomi, and I've been in IC security domain over a decade, and I started as an academic researcher. And my fascination for this domain was always about how can we enable this collaboration. I started with trying to understand how safety and security risk assessment can be combined, how security risk specialists can communicate with safety risk specialists and share the metrics, share the value. That was the first research topic that I was working on. And then I gradually shifted more towards, how cyber risk or OT security risk can be expressed to the business continuity risk or business risk. And through the academic position I had in Japan, and while I was doing the PhD and doing the assistant professor and teaching, I was lucky enough to be able to join some government project where I was able to support asset owners design and evaluate the cyber tabletop exercises, business continuity exercise, drills for earthquake drills also, and also help government to develop this large OT security capability building center called ICCOE, where I supported building up the training curriculum and international engagements. And now I'm in Cognite, and still I'm still fascinated by this collaboration piece in OT security area. Cognite is a company that builds the OT data platform software in oil and gas, chemical, energy, manufacturing, and so on. And the Cognite operation is based on software as a service on a cloud data platform. And when we talk about the cloud security, and there is a shared responsibility model that we share the security operation responsibility together with the cloud service providers and asset owners. But the usual model that they have is two-colored, very simplified two-colored model, and there is no space for the SaaS company like Cognite. And especially when you consider about most of the organization, most critical infra operators would select a hybrid model where they have the public cloud, private cloud, on-prem system all together, and asset owner wants to have the total visibility and data governance over all the platforms and all the systems. There's no really guideline for that. There's no established model for that. So at Cognite, what I'm doing is using my background in research and also in OT security domain, trying to understand and navigate the conversation with customers, trying to navigate the Cognite towards how can we support this new era for the asset owners where they want to have the data control and strong data ownership. So that's where I am today.
Cool. So, the industrial cloud is coming. It's great that you're contributing to that at Cognite. Our topic is a little different today. Our topic today is consequence-driven cyber-informed engineering. And a couple of years ago, you translated the book on the topic, Countering Cyber Sabotage, Consequence-Driven Cyber-Informed Engineering, the book that Andrew Bachman and Sarah Friedman wrote. You translated the book into Japanese. So I wanted to ask you about that. But before I do, can I ask you maybe introduce the book to our listeners? What is, CCE? What is cyber-informed or consequence-driven cyber-informed engineering?
CCE is quite mouthful. Consequence-driven cyber-informed engineering. It was originally part of the cyber-informed engineering. It's one of the pillars of the cyber-informed engineering, which is the framework for combining cyber and engineering side and how we can enable security more by the design security built into the engineering process. And INL, IDEF National Lab, especially focus on this consequence-driven risk analysis part. And they developed this CCE method. It comes with the 4 phases, starting from phase 1, consequence prioritization, which is quite important one for me. And phase 2 is system analysis, meaning how systems or dependencies between the systems, resources, information, data, people are contributing to the consequence, the worst case that you want to avoid to happen. And phase 3 is the consequence-based targeting. This is where you bring in a little bit attacker's perspective and more genuine security perspective, how those dependency between the systems or the path to the consequence can be compromised, how attackers can take advantage of these dependency to make the consequence happen. And then phase 4 is all about mitigation and protection. Okay, how can we cut those the domino effect for attackers to enable the consequence to happen in the most efficient way? And preferably, how can we do that by combining the engineering method and traditional cybersecurity tools and solutions?
Andrew, these are concepts that we've talked about in a number of episodes before, but for anybody who hasn't listened to those, could you just do a quick review, CIE, CCE?
Sure. CIE is the big tent, cyber-informed engineering. It's all about engineering and cybersecurity together. The engineering part has been neglected historically. Overpressure relief valves, manual operations as a fallback. These techniques that are used to manage physical risk can also be used to manage cyber risk. CCE fits within the big tent. I mean, all of a great deal of engineering is under the big tent. All of cybersecurity. CCE is a bunch of techniques, and it's more than what's in the book. But the book itself has really 3 big chunks. One is consequence evaluation, and they recommend don't start with your simplest attacks. They recommend start with your biggest fish and do something about them first. So consequence analysis, and then a few chapters on engineering mitigations, but the bulk of the book is about system of systems analysis, to understand your defenses, to look for choke points in your defenses where you can choke off attacks most efficiently with minimal investment, maximum return in terms of security for minimal investment. So that's the big picture. CI is the big umbrella. CCE is actually a formal training program. It's a piece of CIE, but CIE is big enough that just about anything fits under it that has to do with industrial security, and CCE is a chunk of that. Translating a book is a big job. The CCE book is hundreds of pages, you've got to be sure that the translation is right. It's a huge investment. Why would you undertake that big a job with this book?
When I first met the idea of CCE, I was a researcher at university in Japan. And my research area was trying to understand how we can communicate and engage with stakeholders about OT security in an efficient way, and how we can do the risk assessment that both understands security risk and also safety risk, and also their implication to the business impact. And we struggle to find the way that how this can be achieved in one way, or a simple way. And my running hypothesis back then and also now, this is my belief, is that the OT security is a communication problem. That there are a lot of, it's a team effort. OT security is definitely a team effort. You cannot just have very experienced OT expert Bob to save the world every time. We need to engage the stakeholders, internal stakeholders, different teams to understand the security, and in the same way as you do, in their own job language. If it's an operator, they need to understand what security means for their operation. If it's a business leader, they need to understand cybersecurity, OT security implication in terms of how it impacts their initiatives and their investment. And it is, I found it very difficult because security, at least back then when I was doing the research, academic research, security was mostly discussed as a technical topic. And there was not enough frameworks or ways of conveying important security and security risk in the way that the stakeholders can easily engage with. And CCE, for me, enabled that, especially this first part of CCE in the consequence prioritization. You don't talk about threat, you don't talk about threat actors, you don't talk about security solutions. You talk about what matters most for your business and business continuity. That makes it very simple but easy to align any stakeholder in the organization. So that's why I thought that this idea I really want to convey to my community in Japan in my mother language, and I want to be that catalyst to deliver the message. That's why.
Can I ask you how it came about? It's one thing to read a book and say, hey, this is good stuff. It's another thing to reach out to the authors and actually make it happen. How did this happen?
When I first met the idea of CCE, it didn't occur to me immediately about translating the book. I think back then there was no book yet published either. I got to meet Andrew at S4, and he was presenting about the idea of CCE. That's when the idea of CCE very much clicked with my academic interest. And I went to talk to Andrew at the Beer Bash and said, hey, I really like your idea. I really want to really promote this method in the community in Japan. That's the kind of beginning of my engagement with CCE teams. And one of the big turn point was Japanese government, in collaboration with US government, we organized a capacity building training for Indo-Pacific countries. And ICCOE, Industrial Cybersecurity Center of Excellence, which is the OT security training organization that I support in Japan, was the one that providing training together with US trainer teams, which was INL. And we ended up providing the CCE training for the Indo-Pacific countries, together with Andrew and CCE team in INL and trainers in ICCOE. And it was very fun engagement. It was interesting how CCE was received from the participants also. And after Andy and I were celebrating the successful delivery of that training, it really came to my mind immediately and said to Andrew that, can I translate this book? I really think I can translate this in a meaningful way. And can you support this? That's a kind of beginning. And it took another 2 years or so to actually translate the book.
Okay, so you ran into Andrew at S4, one of the authors of the book. S4 is sort of where the world of industrial cybersecurity, today comes together. You also mentioned the Industrial Cybersecurity Center of Excellence in Japan, a government agency. How were you connected with them? How did you connect those dots?
So I was fortunate enough to be involved in from the very early stage of ICCOE, from the establishment phase of ICCOE at 2017, and my university, the university I used to belong as the assistant professor, and now still support as a visiting researcher. They take care of 1/3 to 1/4 of curriculum at ICCOE. So that is my connection to the organization. And currently, I also support the international engagement that ICCOE does. So when they want to do the international engagement, such as the training, overseas training, or inviting the international speakers to the ICCOE curriculum, I tend to support it. So the joint training we provided between Japan and US, that's also some project that I supported. And that's why I was involved in suggesting that CCE could be the good topic to introduce to Japanese and also Indo-Pacific audience.
Let's talk about the translation. I mean, today you can take, a Word document and pump it through, I don't know, Google Translate or something. There's other translators on the market as well. And, say here, translate this into Japanese. When I've done this with my documents for, a German market in particular, I speak a little German. I looked at the result, and it was full of mistakes, and I had to correct it. So, what was involved in the translation? Did you press a button and it worked? Did you have to review it in detail? Did you have other people reviewing it? How did the actual mechanics of the translation come about?
Andrew, it was all me. It was one person operation. And it was painfully long, and especially I have done translation of, for example, NIST 800 series. Some documents I have translated in Japanese, so I have done a mini project, but not the book. So it was really different level of beast. I definitely use the help of machine translation, sentence by sentence, just to create the baseline. But most of the time, it was more confusing than helpful. So most important thing that I needed to create was the dictionary, the translation dictionary, to be consistent throughout the book on how we translate. For example, as you can see in the title of the book, the consequence, this word appears a lot in the book. And I was very intentional and also a little bit cheeky when I translated this in Japanese. I intentionally translated as business consequence, because I didn't want the readers to mistake in consequence as information breach or some technical consequences or piece of the consequences. But I want this book to be the starter of the conversation with different aspects, seeing the security from the different perspective, more from the business perspective, business risk perspective. So I intentionally changed the translation from consequence in Japanese, business consequence. And so this process of creating dictionary and be happy with this dictionary, that was a very challenging part. There are a lot of terms in CC books that very common for probably military domain or government people, but it's not so much resonating word when it's directly translated. So I also needed to understand each concept very deeply. And Andrew Bohman, the author, one of the authors, was kind and generous enough to have multiple sessions for walking through those terms, what they mean, what's the backstory of these terms, one by one. So that really helped me a lot.
There is something new in the world. Waterfall's Hera Gateway is hardware enforced remote access for OT networks. What does hardware enforced access mean? It means that even if both internet-facing CPUs in the Hera device are completely compromised by a zero-day or a stolen credential, even if they are compromised, the attacker still cannot pivot their attacks through the hardware into the OT network. Hera's hardware saves us. This is true interactive remote access with hardware-based protection from cyber attacks. For details, please visit waterfall-security.com/Hera, that's HERA, Hera, or visit the Waterfall Security Contact Us page and request a briefing with an expert on Hera, hardware-enforced remote access.
So, Nate, I've written a couple of books. I've translated some material, especially into German. And in my experience, exactly what Tomomi talks about, terminology is important, especially when you're translating a technical document. In a lot of the world's languages, a lot of computer concepts are showing up in those languages as English words, sort of transplanted or adopted into the language. This despite the language often having its own words for those concepts. In German, in particular, sort of words that in English have comparatively, short, simple words for a certain technical concept might have in English, they like to jam a few adjectives and nouns together into a single, very long, very complicated word. And what I observe in the German community that I interact with is they've adopted a lot of the short English words rather than using the long formal German words. And when you're putting together a translation, you've got to figure this out. If you use the native language words and the community that you're addressing isn't using those words, they're going to look at your stuff and it's going to be a harder read. It's not the terminology they expect, and vice versa. If you use a bunch of English, transplant a bunch of English words into the translation, and this is not what the community is used to, they're going to look at this and say, this doesn't. It impairs comprehension, and this is not the only challenge with translation. What I found with German in particular, I don't know Japanese, but I know that in German there are linguistic concepts, gender in particular. Everything is gendered. And when you're doing a little bit of dialogue, A said this and B said that, and you use the word you, you've got to select the word very carefully. There's the familiar you, there's the formal you, and in English you don't have all this stuff. And when you translate material from English to German, I used a machine translator. The machine translator just gets it wrong. The machine translator says, well, I need this concept in the German translation and it doesn't exist in English, so I'll just make it up. And they pick the wrong one pretty consistently. So there's a lot of repair that, choose the terminology carefully, and then you got to go through it and just repair what the machine translator does.
And I'm wondering how you felt about the particular point of translation she highlighted in her answer, how she translated consequences to business consequences, because, you and I talk about these concepts a lot. We don't really focus on them through the business lens. Usually it's like physical consequences, for example.
And, I was thinking about that myself after the interview here and, reflecting on it a little bit. I wonder if it's because it sort of reflects Tomomi's focus on risk assessment. She was doing a lot of risk assessment work in her research. And, who consumes the results of a risk assessment? It's generally the business decision makers who have to decide, am I going to provide funding to my engineering team, to my IT teams to fix this problem? Explain to me in one-syllable words how much trouble we're in. And they want to understand the impact on the business. My own focus, I tend to work more with the engineering teams who are tasked with, okay, you have a budget, solve this problem. And they change the design of the systems in order to prevent physical consequences. In order to keep things from blowing up, in order to keep trains from colliding. And so I might, if I were doing this, I might have been tempted to use to substitute physical consequence rather than business consequence. But thinking about it, that might just be because of who I communicate with. And Tomomi said at the beginning, it's all about communication. You got to get these concepts across these sort of chasms of understanding. I'm curious about intellectual property. I mean, I see the Idaho National Laboratory, logo on the CCE book. I know that Sarah Friedman and Andrew Bachman were employees, I think, of Idaho National Laboratory at the time they wrote the book. I'm assuming that INL owns the copyright on the book. But you did the translation. Can you talk about intellectual property? Do you own the Japanese translation? How does that work?
Well, at least I know I don't own the copyright. So it was primary work for hire. It's kind of twofold contract. So one side is my contract with INL as the service provider, meaning that I will provide this translation service for them so that they can have the Japanese version of manuscript in their organization. And on behalf of INL, I was sending the manuscript to the publisher. And ICCOE in Japan, they funded to publish this book in Japanese. So I was just bridging it in between.
Okay, so a lot of work doing the translation. How's it been received?
I got the very kind words from people in Japan that they enjoy the book, and some people mentioned about specific part of the job that specific part of the book that resonated with them very well, which is super rewarding to me. But the first review I got on a public platform on Amazon was very funny to me. It said that the 4 stars, great book, great contents, -1 star for the bad translation. So that really made me laugh. Yes, it's. I know I'm not the professional translator. I cannot translate in the same level as how people would translate great novels into Japanese. I can't yet, but at least I made them read. So that's a win for me.
Indeed, it's disappointing when you get stuff like that. I remember, when I published my books, I get positive, I get negative. You gotta shrug it off. I think the lesson is that the material is now available to a Japanese audience that doesn't speak English. So, have you got any sort of reaction from even verbal or face to face from the industrial security in Japan? How useful has CCE been in Japan?
Majority of people reach out to me saying that the CCE is very inspiring method and inspiring approach. But I'm reading between the lines, and most of the times CCE is a little bit too big of the project, and it's not something bite-sized for most of the people to easily adapt tomorrow. So that is one challenge that I found during and after this translation project. The great feedback I got, not necessarily negative, but I think it really, really represents what Japanese community's character is that one person told me he's a risk assessment, OT risk assessment specialist. He supported many, many organizations. And he said that Tomomi, CCE needs to be dumbed down. It needs to be easy to do for anyone. Right now, CCE is only useful for the people who understand OT security at the deepest level. That's not enough. It needs to be easy for any person possible. And that's something I'm thinking about a lot these days. I'm thinking about OT security solutions, and a lot of OT security project is naturally targeting towards the critical asset operators, critical infrastructure companies, and military organizations, government-funded organizations. So the project fund in the size is huge. But there is a concept as cyber poverty line, where organization even if they know about cybersecurity and know about the risk, they just simply can't afford it. They just don't have the resource available and any solution at their hand to mitigate the risk. And CCE is an elegant concept. And right now I'm thinking how we can make CCE and any other OT security or cybersecurity concepts, framework, solutions to be affordable and easy as possible to implement fast. Because especially when we think about supply chain security and security as a whole.
Another, I don't know, legal nit maybe. In my understanding, CCE is trademarked. Idaho National Laboratory certifies training providers. You can only call yourself a certified CCE training provider if you've been certified by INL. I'm curious: is the Industrial Control System Center of Cybersecurity Center of Excellence, is it certified?
No, ICCOE is not certified to provide CCE or auxiliary training, at least on my knowledge. But I can talk a little bit about how we introduce CCE as a concept. So ICCOE runs a one-year curriculum for industry professionals, and they basically leave the work for 1 year to focus on the OT security training from basically 9 to 5 plus their own research project hours. And in there, we teach many principles from traditional IT security, network security aspect to OT or engineering discipline and risk management business disciplines. And recently, we also add cloud, digital transformation, those domain too. And CCE fit into the category of security leadership. And one of the trainer, Hiroshi Sasaki, a dear colleague of mine, he introduces CCE as part of the method that they can use when they are building the security strategy for their own organization, where they go back to the company. So some of the framework they also introduce is NIST CSF. They also mentioned about using the 6443 and other ISO 27K also. And as one of the other tools that they can use to frame their own security strategy, they introduce CCE. So we don't go into detail in the same way that the INL folks provide CCE training, but we explain the CCE concept, and the trainee at ICCOE engage in CCE and how they can use CCE's concept and framework to present their security strategy to the executives.
In the course of translating the book, you presumably developed a deep understanding of the material. You have to understand the material in order to translate it correctly. How's that served you? I mean, personally, you've developed a deep understanding of CCE, translating the book. Your name is on the book. Can you talk about has the experience of doing this translation, changed your career at all?
So the book was published last year, 2023 in June in Japanese, and we haven't done any book tour or anything. And I'm also based in UK now. I'm not based in Japan, so I don't really have day-to-day way to engage with people actually and get the book in their hand. So I'm not really feeling any burning change or anything, but internally, it was such a privilege to be able to dissect the word by word and really, really print the book in my brain by translating the work and feel Andy and Sarah's work so close. And also the book has the part that's written by Mike Asante, and I had never met him in person, but I can't really express how I felt about translating his part of the book, because his word, the opening words, that the opening section that he wrote, it was so powerful, and it was such an honor to translate that in Japanese. And when I hear the good word and good feedback from people in Japan, I always think about the part that Mike wrote in English, and how I also tried to match his energy to put in the translation. And yeah, so externally and career trajectory wise, I don't see a lot of changes, but it was internally, it was a big change for me.
And if I may come back to the present day, I mean, you're working at Cognite, you're doing some sort of cloud stuff on the industrial side. You know, the industrial cloud is coming for everyone sooner or later in some capacity or another. You know, is your sort of deep background in cybersecurity, is that part of your role at Cognite today?
I have to say, when I first learned about what is Cognite's mission and what they are trying to achieve, it made me really anxious because I was very much I was and I am also very much focused on security and reliability and operation, and I was more worried about how these new technologies disrupt the reliable operation. So that was in the beginning, but right now, as in the project, what we are trying to achieve is how can we make sure that when we provide software as a service, that doesn't disrupt the security or reliability of the operation, the physical operation itself. Especially the digital transformation, it started in the enterprise area, and then it's getting closer and closer to the critical operations. And when I look into most of the documents on how to deploy cloud technology in a secure way, a lot of government guidance and best practice was treating public cloud as the starting point. And there was not enough information about how do you manage the security and governance of a hybrid setup or the private cloud setup. And especially how do you continue providing a service when the stakeholder between the SaaS provider like Cognite and asset owner and cloud service provider, this how can you manage these three parties or more, potentially more parties involved? How do you make this tight connection while giving the data owner, asset owners the full visibility and full control on security? Given this is largely driven by security requirements, my background give a little bit perspective to balance out the need for digital transformation and need for pushing through the boundary and understanding and accommodating the asset owner's needs and IT and security team's concern. So that is where I am. And then I also see quite a connection between the CCE. I'm seeing CCE as the tool to help the communication and understanding what is a consequence, and especially in terms of what we do at Cognite, understanding the dependency between systems, dependency between the data and systems and people and critical process. That's really important. And having a CCE framework in the back of my head, it really helps me to have the dialogue with customers, industry, and stakeholders internally and externally.
Well, Tomomi, thank you for joining us. It's been a real pleasure talking to you. Before I let you go, can I ask you to sum up for us? You know, what are the key messages we should take away here? We've been talking about CCE. We've been talking about translating a book. We've been talking about the importance of the cloud. What should we take away from this episode and from your experience in these arenas?
Oh, it was really great fun doing this interview with you, Andrew. So thank you for having me. My takeaway is that communication and collaboration, that's really key to enable OT security, especially at the same speed as digital transformation. CCE is a useful tool to enable that communication and collaboration. You get to examine your security strategy in this program from different perspectives. And now CCE book is available both in English and Japanese. So if you have Japanese colleagues, if you know somebody in Japan, reach out. They may know about CCE, and now you can talk about CCE together, which is awesome. And right now, I'm in Cognite. Looking forward to adapt this CCE principle into industrial cloud systems and try to, again, enable that collaboration between the cloud service providers, asset owners, and SaaS provider like Cognite. And learning about how we can bring the data governance back to asset owners. Again, the book is available, CCE book is available in Amazon. And if you are coming to Japan, let me know, or let ICCOE know. We'll be always happy to talk with you. And if you have experience with industrial cloud, public cloud, private cloud, hybrid, if you decide not to use cloud in the industrial space, and why, let me know. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm happy to talk with you about your challenges and your experience and learn from you. So thank you.
Andrew, that just about concludes your interview. Do you have any final word to take us out with today?
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at, a lot of the topics we talked about are very timely. I'm a big fan of CCE and CIE. It's all about consequences. Consequences drive the strength of required security programs. But I'm looking at, I'm on the end of my career. And I started in technology and sort of worked into cybersecurity and risk assessments. My most recent book, the topic is risk. It's not in the title, but it's all about how do you use an understanding of risk to decide how much cybersecurity to do, how much engineering to do. I see Tomomi working the other way. She started with risk and with sort of communicating with business decision makers, and is now tackling what I believe is the future of industrial automation. And of course, industrial cybersecurity goes with industrial automation. She's tackling the future, which is the cloud. And the vision for the cloud is very compelling. It's, the cloud can save enormous amounts of money. It can add flexibility. It's a tremendous vision. The question is, how much of the vision can we realize safely? And I think the answer is almost all of it. We just don't know how yet. So I look forward to, keeping track of what Tomomi is doing at Cognite. I look forward to an opportunity to invite her back in a year when she's sort of figured out a bunch of this stuff, because the world needs to understand how to reap the benefits of the industrial cloud without incurring unacceptable physical risk. So to me, it's huge that she's taking this deep understanding of risk and risk assessments, and now diving into the technology and hopefully, leading the way for us in terms of the industrial cloud.
Thank you to Tomomi Aoyama for speaking with you, Andrew. And Andrew, as always, thank you for speaking with me.
It's always a pleasure. Thank you, Nate.
This has been the Industrial Security Podcast from Waterfall. Thanks to everyone out there listening.